Either you surrender or you fight for your freedom till death. What will we do? I ask myself this question. And my belief is, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but one. And we will fight. And when Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Mr. President, Honorable Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored today to represent my country at this forum of world leaders, where we have a chance to discuss problems that the world is facing. I want to talk about a lot of problems, but just 4 today. And I especially came to this forum despite a difficult time in my country, facing challenges. I would not have come, but because I feel that there are some very urgent problems which the world must address. So first of all, I start with climate change. So many leaders have talked about climate change. But Mr. President, I feel that there is a lack of seriousness. Perhaps world leaders some of the leaders who can do a lot, do not realize the urgency of the situation. We have a lot of ideas, but as someone said, ideas without funding is mere hallucination. Pakistan, I'll give you start with my own country. Our country is amongst the top 10 nations in the world which are most affected by climate change. We depend upon our rivers. We are mainly an agricultural country. And 80% of the water in our rivers comes from our glaciers. The glaciers not just on the Pakistani side, even India. The 80% of the water in Ganges and the Indian rivers also comes from the glaciers, from the Himalayan glaciers, Karakoram, Hindu Kush. And these glaciers are melting at quite a rapid pace. We detected already 5,000 glacial lakes in our mountains. And if this keeps going, if nothing is done, we are scared that humans are facing a huge catastrophe. In my country, when my party came to power in the province of KP, we planted 1 billion trees in 5 years. Now we've set ourselves a target of 10 billion trees in Pakistan. Idea being to counter the effects of global warming. But one country cannot do anything. This has to be a combined effort of the world. My optimism comes from the fact that humans, the Almighty has endowed humans with great powers. We can do anything, provided our survival instinct is stirred up. And this is really what I hope that the United Nations will take a lead in this. There must be more emphasis. Richer countries must be pushed. Countries that are responsible for, mainly are responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. They must be pushed because our country contributes minuscule amount to greenhouse gases. So I feel that the United Nations must take leadership in this. My second issue for me right now is even more critical. Mr. President, every year, billions of dollars leave the poorer countries and go towards rich countries. Billions of dollars siphoned off by the ruling elites of the developing world. And they find their way into Western bank accounts, offshore accounts, tax havens, expensive properties hidden behind companies bought in Western capitals. Mr. President, this is devastating the developing world. This is causing more poverty, debts. It's impoverishing the developing world. The difference between rich and poor countries is growing because of this. Money laundering, which happens because money leaves the poorer countries into rich countries, is not treated the same as, for instance, money from drugs or terror financing. The seriousness which terror financing and money from drugs, the way it is treated, it's not the same. The way the poor countries are being plundered by their elites. It's not happening. In my country, when I took charge of our government a year back, in the 10 years preceding that, our total debt went up 4 times. The debt we had accumulated in 60 years, just in 10 years, it went up 4 times. As a result, the total revenue we collected in 1 year, half of it went into debt servicing. My third point is Islamophobia. There are 1.3 billion Muslims in this world. There are millions of Muslims living in other countries, European countries, and the US as minorities. Islamophobia, since 9/11, has grown at a pace where it is alarming. Human communities live together. There should be understanding amongst them. But Islamophobia is creating a division. Muslim women wearing hijab, it's become an issue. It's become an issue in some countries. Hijab is some sort of a weapon. A woman can take off her clothes in countries, but she can't put on more clothes. How is this happening? Because of Islamophobia. And how did this Islamophobia start? After 9/11. And why did it start? Because certain Western leaders equated terrorism with Islam. Islamic terrorism. Radical Islam. What is radical Islam? There is only one Islam. And that is the Islam we follow of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no other Islam. Radical Islam, Islamic terrorism, what message did they send to people in the West? And why is there Islamophobia? How is a person in New York, in the Midwest, in the US, in European capital, how is he going to distinguish between who is a moderate Muslim and who's a radical Muslim? Because terrorism has nothing to do with any religion. So where the misunderstanding about Islam came, and one of the reasons it caused Islamophobia, that was in 1989, this book was published, maligning, insulting, ridiculing our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there was a reaction in the Muslim world. The West couldn't understand what was the problem. Because in the West, because I have spent so much time in the West, religion is perceived completely differently. They don't They don't look upon religion like we do. And so Islam was supposed to be an intolerant religion. It was against freedom of expression. And Islam took a real beating 30 years ago. I still remember it became a watershed. And every 2 or 3 years, someone would malign our Prophet, peace be upon him. There would be a reaction by the Muslims. And again, it was Islam, an intolerant religion. Again, this time, I blame a certain section of the people in the West who deliberately provoked this, knowing the impact it would have. But the majority of the people in the West didn't understand. This is where, again, Muslim leadership let the Muslims down. We should have explained to them what our Prophet, peace be upon him, means to us. So in 1 minute, I'll try and explain what he means to us. Our Prophet was the witness to the divine book, the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran is the book of guidance for Muslims, and the Prophet's life was living the Quran. He was an example of what the Quran guided us to be. So he is the ideal we all try to get to. The Prophet created the state of Medina, the first state in Islam. That state was the basis of a Muslim civilization which became the predominant civilization for the next 700 years. And what was that state? I hear such strange things about Islam, that it is against women, it's against minorities. The first state of Islam in Medina, it was the first time a welfare state was set up. The state took responsibility of the weak, widows, orphans, poor people, handicapped beings. We have, in the Western society, and quite rightly, the Holocaust is treated with sensitivity because it gives the Jewish community pain. That's all we ask, that do not use freedom of speech to cause us pain by insulting our Holy Prophet. That's all we want. And now, the number 4th point, Mr. President, and this is the most critical point, is the reason why I especially came here. It is about what is happening in Kashmir. Before I go on this, I want to make one thing clear, that when we came to power, my first priority was that Pakistan would be a country which will try its best to bring peace. We had been through this war on terror. We joined the United States war on terror after 2001. And Pakistan went through one of its worst periods where 70,000 Pakistanis died and over 150 billion was lost to our economy. And Mr. President, I opposed the war because in the 80s, Pakistan had joined the Western countries in what was the freedom struggle then in Afghanistan against the Soviets. And it was funded by the Western countries. These Mujahideen groups, which were treated in guerrilla warfare, were trained by Pakistan Army, funded by the Western countries, and especially US, and they waged what was a freedom struggle in Afghanistan. The Soviets called them terrorists. We called them freedom fighters. 1989, the Soviets retreated. The Americans packed up and left. Pakistan was left with these groups. Come 9/11, Pakistan joined the United States in this war on terror. And now our government was supposed to, the reason why I opposed joining this war, because here we had indoctrinated them in jihad, meaning freedom struggle against foreign occupation. Now, because we had joined the US, and the US had occupied Afghanistan, entire campaign, almost the entire campaign of Mr. Modi in the election was how he had taught Pakistan a lesson that their jets had killed 350 terrorists. Complete lie, they had just killed about 10 trees of ours, which was quite painful given that, you know, we are growing all these trees. He then the election campaign, Mr. Modi used words like, "This is just a trailer. The movie is about to start. I went into Pakistan and taught them a lesson." This was the election campaign. Okay, so we thought, you know, us politicians make all these statements to win elections. So, okay, after elections, we'll get back to our normal relationship. Well, the moment the elections ended, we approached India. No response, but then we discovered they were trying to push us in the FATF blacklist to bankrupt us. That's when we realized there was an agenda. And that agenda became obvious on the 5th August when India went against 11 United Nations Security Council resolutions, which say that Kashmir is a disputed territory and the people of Kashmir have the right of self-determination. They went against that. They went against Simla Accord, which is about bilateral, sorting out our differences through bilateral means, went against that. They actually went against the Indian Constitution. Illegally, they revoked Article 370, which gave Kashmir the special status. They got an extra 180,000 troops there. Total number of security forces in Kashmir now are 900,000. And they put 8 million people of Kashmir under curfew. Mr. President, now I just briefly want to make the people understand, how can anyone do something like this? And for that, I have to explain to you what is RSS. RSS, Mr. Narendra Modi is a life member of RSS. RSS was an organization that was inspired by Adolf Hitler and Mussolini, came about in 1925. They believed in racial purity, racial superiority. They also believed they were an Aryan race like the Nazi believed they were an Aryan race. All that I'm saying can be verified. This is the time of information revolution. You can Google all this, what I'm saying. But it is very important for me to explain this to you so you know what is happening in India. This RSS believed in the ethnic cleansing of Muslims from India. At one point, there was racial superiority of the Hindu race. Secondly, it was hatred for the Muslims and for the Christians. You hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. If a conventional war starts between the two countries, Mr. President, if a conventional war starts, and anything could happen, but supposing a country 7 times smaller than its neighbor is faced with the choice, either you surrender or you fight for your freedom till death, what will we do? I ask myself this question. And my belief is, La ilaha illallah, there is no God but one. And we will fight. And when and when a nuclear armed country fights to the end, it will have consequences far beyond the borders. It will have consequences for the world, which is why I repeat I'm here. Because I'm warning you, it's not a threat.